cars like this only exist as we know them thanks to the vision of one man. Not David Buick, who founded the company, nor even Louis Chevrolet, who started his own company a few years later, and certainly not Antoine de Cadillac, founder of Detroit, for whom Henry Leland named his car company. It was the genius of William Durant that brought them all together to form General Motors, not in Detroit, but Flint, the vehicle city.
This is where General Motors began, really, and not as a company, but as an idea. This room was the place that Billy Durant and Dallas Stewart got started in manufacturing personal transportation vehicles. And that started out as a little two-wheeled, horse-drawn vehicle called the Flint Road Cart.
But one buggy was never going to be enough for the man Wall Street nicknamed Magic Billy.
They were pioneers in what today we'd call vertical manufacturing. They had their own forests, hardwood forests in the south. They made their own spokes, their own wheels, their own axles, their own paint and varnish, in addition to assembling the cart. So that was very different for the time.
It was his vision of an entire industry that separated Durant from those around him. Henry Ford only invented mass production after Durant brought an industry together in one place and showed him how it could be done. The Rouge was just Flint in a single factory.
Alfred Sloan said that it was really Durant, while he was with Buick before General Motors, inviting C.S. Mott to Flint as a supplier to locate next to the Buick plant and then build this supplier base near the automobile company that really was the start of not only General Motors but the auto industry.
Durant quickly saw that the future lay not in horse-drawn carts but petrol-driven cars, and that led him to join forces with David Buick.
Flint had become known as the vehicle city. That first car was the 1905 Buick Model C. And by 1908, Buick had become so successful, they were the top selling automobile in the country, ahead of Cadillac, ahead of Oldsmobile, even ahead of Ford, which had just introduced the Model T. That success in 1908 led Durant to form General Motors, September 16th of that year.
But things didn't run smoothly in the infant industry. Bankers weren't seeing returns and pulled the plug on several of them, including General Motors.
Durant went around the country looking for investors, looking for bankers to get a loan to get the company back in production. He finally did that. It was quite an expensive loan, putting up over $20 million of assets.
Say billions instead of millions, and that's roughly how much was at stake by modern standards.
Durant remained on the board of directors, but he wanted to gain control of General Motors again.
To do it, Magic Billy had to go back to the beginning and start again.
He formed a new company, which had in it the Chevrolet Motor Company with Louis Chevrolet. That company became so successful that Durant was able to launch a new empire and trade Chevrolet stocks 4-5 to 1 for every share of General Motors so he could regain control.
And while he was doing all that in secret, he also persuaded Louis Chevrolet to build smaller cars to compare with the Model T, and thus he set Chevrolet on course to become the megalith of the US car industry.
So he consolidated all the little in Chevrolet production, introduced the Chevrolet Royal Mail Roadster, small, economical, value vehicle, and went after Ford directly. Again, he became so successful that in 1916 he was able to walk into a board meeting and announce that he now controlled General Motors.
Durant and his partners and rivals were playing for the same massive stakes as the infant oil industry, and at the same time they were pushing the boundaries of 100 other brand new technologies.
It's a remarkable story. You look at the names, you look at the characters that were involved in this. Where else? And I'll say, even Detroit, including Detroit, Flint is really where this American auto industry really took hold. When you look at the likes of all of the General Motors companies, Buick certainly, Chevrolet, Nash, Chrysler, all getting their starts here in Flint.
And as we've seen, the reason the car industry came here was no accident. The skills and expertise they needed were already here.
Some of the people were in Flint already because of the carriage industry. You have to look at Flint, the vehicle city. It earned that nickname because of the carriage industry in 1901, long before Detroit became the motor city. That industry had everything that you needed for the manufacture of motor cars, except engine production.
But it took a man with the gift of always seeing the big picture to realize what opportunities existed here. A man with drive and energy to make it a reality. And a man with the magic touch to make it the biggest and best the world had ever seen.
He was high-flying. Durant was a high-flying entrepreneur. He had a mind for business that ran at 120 miles an hour. It's said that Dort was really the one that kept him grounded, kept him from flying too close to the sun.
But later, without his founding partner, Durant did exactly that, and he might have got away with it, but for the fact that he was too volatile for the bankers who preferred a guaranteed 5% to a possible 50%.
1916 to 1920, the years that Durant was back at GM, flying high as ever, more acquisitions, expanding, and then lost control once again in 1920. And then when he started the Durant Motor Corporation, and that expanded just before the Depression, again, he lost control. It's almost that he was flying so high, he was moving so fast. Business got complicated. It wasn't the small, tight-knit group that it used to be.
Ousted and replaced by Alfred Sloan, Durant did what he always did, started again. But a situation even he couldn't control was waiting in the wings. It would be easy to say he was a victim of the Wall Street crash, but really he was a victim of his own self-belief. But he left behind him a legacy like no other before him, or since.
Make no mistake, without Billy Durant, there would be no General Motors.